Hi guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today I have a very special video for you, and I know I say that a lot, but this is a very special video because it's going to cover one of my favorite notes in perfumery, and that is the note of iris or orris butter, or however you want to describe it. I know I've done a couple first impressions for you guys, mostly because so many people in the community have been so kind to me, and I wanted to, show that when they send me stuff that I really do care and appreciate it and are paying attention to it. I don't want to just throw it in a drawer and come back to it a year later. So I've done some first impressions. I obviously have a million fragrances that I will ultimately review. But this is going to be this is not a top 10 video on the note of iris, which, like I said, one of my favorite notes. I love iris in all its forms, however it can be used. Anytime I pick up iris in a perfume, I instantly become much more intrigued and interested, and I want to dive into the perfume in depth and understand it more because iris just has this effect on me. I just love the way that, it adds this beautiful powderiness to many fragrances, and it adds this almost like an extra dimension, if you will. It's almost like you smell something in 2D versus 3D, or even 4D. So before I do that, though, I would like to read something that Yura sent me. This is from one of his friends who is a perfume, what would you call it? Maybe like a perfume investigator, I guess you could say. I'm not sure exactly the term that he used, but I want to read this because it's the best description of how iris is, the actual raw material is broken down and used in perfumery. So first, I'm going to read this. Now, so I don't want to, act like I'm doing some sort of copyright issue here, but I want to get the terms right. He posted this on Facebook, and I don't know this guy. He's a friend of Yura Rose. But he obviously knows his stuff. He said that orris root is one of the most precious fragrance raw materials. It is harvested after 3+ years of cultivation and develops its fragrant character over time. The freshly harvested root, rhizome, has no smell at all. Okay, so when it comes out of the ground, they pull it, it doesn't have a smell. Orris rhizomes will be stored in boxes for more than 3 years. During this time, a slow oxidation process reveals the characteristic note of orris, which comes from the decomposition of iridales into irones. Interestingly, the floral note of orris is more reminiscent of an earthy, woody violet flower than of the orris flower itself. Responsible for this are irones, which are potent little molecules with an intense floral, powdery, violet-like profile. The rhizomes contain an amount of 0.1 to 0.2% oil. The rhizomes are powdered and undergo molecular distillation to get the orris butter, which has an intensely earthy, woody, fatty, but also sweet and floral character. For some, it even has tones of vanilla and chocolate in direction of gourmands. The fatty and waxy aspect comes from the present fatty acid. So waxy, powdery, those are key words because that's what a lot of people pick up when they smell orris. So that contributes to the texture and the smell, that buttery appearance of orris butter. And Yura was actually telling me that a lot of the ingredients used by perfumers when they create a violet smell versus when they create an orris smell are the same. It's how they dose it in the fragrance. So very interesting stuff. Obviously, I'm not a trained perfumer, so this is an area that I have to kind of bow down to the experts on. And so I just wanted to get that out of the way. Before we hop into this list, and I spent a lot of time picking these out, and I wanted to show you some of the fragrances in my collection that use iris or orris. Same thing, basically. If you see iris or orris, they are interchangeable for one another. Let us do scent of the day, as is customary. So I want to show you guys this because this is a very special fragrance. So I've been wearing it for the last 3 or 4 hours now. I just wanted to give it a fresh spray. The sprayer on this is kind of kaput, but it works, and I'm just happy to have a bottle. And as you can see, I am respecting the fingerprint police who are trolling these videos looking for prints. This is Midnight in Paris. So this is not part of the Iris video. This is my scent of the day, which I wanted to give a shout out to. This is actually created by Olivier Polge. And it's funny because this came out in 2010, okay? 5 years after he created the original Dior Homme. And his fingerprints are all over it. Speaking of fingerprints, this is such a magical fragrance. I still cannot believe that the House of Van Cleef and Arpels discontinued this. Because they could easily have kept this around, and they could have done Midnight in New York. They could have done Midnight in Texas. Hell, I'll be the creative director for Midnight in Texas for them. They could have done Midnight in San Francisco. They could have done Midnight in Beijing. I mean, you name it. They could have done a Midnight in whatever city they wanted to highlight, and people would have bought it. Look at the beautiful bottle. The sky is supposed to be the star constellations you see when you're actually in Paris. So they took the time, they did the attention to detail. This is the EDT, by the way. The EDP is almost impossible to hunt down. This is rare enough, but this used to be a cheapie. You could get this for 30 bucks, 40 bucks. And it's such a beautifully calming fragrance. And again, one thing I want to point out, and this is something that I just noticed, it has nothing to do, I don't have any facts to back this up, but this is just, again, something I've noticed. Look who the distributor is. It's Inter Parfums. So Inter Parfums, I am very impressed with their work, you know, for who they are, what they do. For a modern house, a modern distributor house, I have stumbled across many fragrances like this, where if it's done by Inter Parfums, it's done well, it's done properly, especially for a modern fragrance. The leather in this, the tea, the benzoin, there's this almond note that is done so well that you could think it's from the Guerlain L'Homme line, but it's even better. I'm sorry, Guerlain Ideal line, but it's done even better. This is a next step up from just the EDT of Guerlain Ideal. Oh man, this is so good. It is a travesty it's discontinued. I would love to find a EDP bottle one day, but I'm just happy to have this. And I told you my sprayer is on the spritz here. Let me just show you here. It actually is completely broken. And so it still sprays, but you really gotta work at it. But anyways, alas, a small price to pay for something so beautiful, long discontinued. If I do a discontinued list, which I have to, people keep asking me to do a favorite discontinued fragrance list, which will probably have to be multiple parts. This will be in there, hands down, no doubt. I love wearing this fragrance. This is one of those wearable fragrances to me. It's in the 40s and 50s today. Perfect. Perfect weather for this. So that is my scent of the day. Okay, let's kick this off. So I'm gonna try to do this in stages. The first stage that I want to show you, the main iris fragrances you're probably thinking of, will be at the end. But I want to show you some fragrances that utilize the note of iris that, you know, if you're not really into perfumes, you may not realize it. And in fact, it took me a long time to actually single out and pick out and break down the iris note in some of these. The first one's more prominent and easier, but it does get a little bit harder as these go on. So these are leather fragrances, and you know leather is my favorite note. I love a good leather note, hence, here we go. This is a beautiful leather. But the first one I'm going to show you is this. This is Christian Dior Cuir Cannage. Now, this is basically Demachy's take on Cuir de Russie, which is coming up next. And I want to start here because it's a decant, not a full bottle. But the leather, the iris, there's a very prominent floral note, orange blossom and jasmine. It's so good. There's tobacco. I actually really enjoy wearing this. It's easy to wear for me. It's you know, it does have that birch tar because it's supposed to be a take on Russian leather. But anytime you get that makeup-y, you know, this was supposed to smell like his grandmother's handbag or something is the brief that he said. Who knows if that's true or not. But anytime you get that makeup-y, powdery, like you've just smeared makeup on something, they use iris for that because it gives off that accord. And here, while it's not as nuanced as Cuir de Russie by Chanel, I don't think it's as much of a masterpiece as Cuir de Russie by Chanel. This is a very wearable iris, leather, floral, birch tar. Oh, it's so good. Very good. I have 2 of these little 10 ml decants. Thank you, Moudessir, by the way. Look up Moudessir on base notes if you want somebody trustworthy where you can buy decants like this off of. Sometimes you don't always need a full bottle. I would love to have 750 ml like the duck. Cheers, Rich. By the way, excuse me whilst I hydrate, and except this time it's going to be a caffeine break, not a water break. Throw a curveball at the duck today. Okay, so now let's go to Cuir de Russie because it deserves some love in what they've done with the iris here. Now, this is the vintage 80s bottle. This is not a 70s bottle. This is an 80s bottle when Jacques Polge basically brought this line back from the dead. This was originally created by why can I not think of his name? Oh, Ernst Beau. This was originally created by Ernst Beau in 1924, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the absolute gold standards for Russian leather. There is one I discovered recently that I will show you next. Oh my God, every time I smell this, my brain just goes flatline. I mean, I just can't think of anything. It is so amazing. It's one of the greatest perfumes ever created. And actually, it took me a little bit to realize that the iris plays a bigger role in this than I thought it did. The leather is so amazing in this. There's tobacco, there's birch, there's some other florals that are turned down in this version. This is not what it comes in anymore. It doesn't look like this bottle. This bottle's long discontinued. They put it in the Les Exclusifs bottle. First it was the EDT in 2006 or 7, I think, and then it went to the EDP once they reformulated it. But I am just so very blessed to have this bottle. And this might be the prize of my collection, to be honest with you. These are so hard to come by. And whenever they do pop up for sale, people want just exorbitant amount of money. This is Patel pour homme level, basically. But it's worth it. I mean, it really is. If you're going to drop $1,000, don't go buy Roja's Parfum de la Nuit number 1, 2, or 3. Go buy this. I mean, seriously, if you can find a bottle unopened, unsprayed like I did, it's so complex, and once you really hone into the iris, you know, you really have to kind of search it out. But once you find it, you really smell the beauty that it adds to a composition, because this is mostly about the leather and the birch, and it's so well done. It just, I've said this before, it reminds me of being in Russia in the 1920s, which obviously I wasn't alive then, but it reminds me of Anastasia in her palace with, you know, beautiful ball gowns and horses outside and carriages, and there is that horse carriage thing going on in the background. It's a bit animalic. God, it's so good. This is fine French perfumery at its absolute finest. But I do have to say that I found a fragrance by Roja Dove, and it's called Great Britain. And if I had to buy one Roja fragrance right now that I don't have a full bottle of, this would be it. This really surprised me. Is it a take on Cuir de Russie, yes, it absolutely is a take on Cuir de Russie. There's no question about that, because it's a Russian leather, okay? Is Cuir Cannage a take on Cuir de Russie? Yes, I think it is. This is so well done, though. I really like what he did here. I would love to know who the perfumer is. Oh God, it's so good. It is everything that I love in Cuir de Russie, but he amped up those dirty animalic undertones. There's ambrette here, which is a pretty expensive plant that creates this musk, this natural musk type smell. He loves amping up the labdanum, which will come later in another fragrance. The labdanum is amped up, and he lists both violet in the mid and orris in the base. So it's listed twice. Yura, or one of our resident perfumers, I would love to know, how that is done, whether they use different molecules as the fragrance dries, or how it works out that way. But there's supposedly real ambergris in this, which I do smell an ambergris accord. It is just, it's so good. I wish I had a full bottle of this. I will never buy a full bottle of this, though. I'd love to buy a partial, to be quite honest, but I would never buy a full bottle of this. It's just at $2,000 for 100 ml. It's a little exorbitant. I mean, I don't want to support that just because I don't want to. If I could find a partial, I would totally go for it, though. Okay, another one of my favorite leather fragrances that has this orris and iris touch that I never really realized until I kind of honed in on it is this. This is Leonard Perse from the year 1980, and I do have a backup bottle, but unfortunately these are only 25 ml bottles. But I love this fragrance. This is one of my favorite leather fragrances of all time. The perfumer is one of my favorite perfumers too that gets almost no love, Ron Winograd. He made a couple fragrances that absolutely blew me away, and this is one of them. And the good thing about this is because nobody talks about it, you can still have these bottles for pretty cheap and enjoy this. The castoreum in this is out of this world. It's one of my favorite castoreum fragrances, right up there with Antaeus by Chanel. This is a year earlier than Antaeus, according to Fragrantica. But the leather and iris obviously are a very special combination. And here there's obviously other things. There's labdanum, there's big oak moss in this because it's an 80s fragrance. And it was long discontinued, so I don't think you have to worry about batch code. I think any bottle you buy will have the big oak moss in it. There's old school carnation. There's a carrot note, which is very strange. Maybe they meant carrot seeds. Sometimes perfumers can substitute carrot seeds for iris, I believe. It gives off the same powderiness, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But I think I remember hearing that somewhere. But there is iris listed in this as well, with cedar, artemisia, that old school artemisia, marjoram, basil thing going on. Very masculine opening too. And there's a lavender note in this, but I love this fragrance. I just adore it. I wish I had a 100 ml bottle, but my 225 mls will have to suffice. And then probably my favorite leather fragrance of all time, and I only grabbed one. If you want to see the other bottles of this that I have, go watch my leather video of This Is Not a Top 10, and that is Bel Ami. So this is the old school shaker bottle, which is an awesome bottle. Looks like you're about to make somebody a martini. But I prefer the first reformulation, which you will see in my leather video. But this is so bright for a leather. Somebody said, I think the Duck said, Rich Mitch said it reminds him of a London. And I completely get that. It has this aristocratic, you know, like you're gonna go wear a top hat and go to a ball or something, which I've never done in my life. But if I was, I would wear this. And this has this sage, bergamot, cardamom, or mandarin orange, and lemon in the top, with carnation, patchouli, cedar, basil, orris root. So the orris is in the mid with jasmine, and then leather, oak moss, styrax, vetiver, amber, vanilla, and the random coconut note that snuck in the base. I just love this fragrance. It's just, it's so good. I just want to wear it right now. I mean, as good as Midnight in Paris is, and it is very good. It's much more modern. This is me. This has my name all over it. And so happy that Amouage from Enchanté Perfumes found me this vintage bottle, and so happy that I have 2 other bottles of the first reformulation, which is actually my favorite personally. Okay, now we're gonna go on to a YSL, and this is a fragrance that has a ton of notes. So, you know, I'm singling out the orris because this is a perfume about iris and orris, but there's so many other things going on here. That is YSL's Opium. This is the EDT. God, I love this fragrance. This is also a pure love for me. This is one of those women's fragrances, almost like, you know, when I first smelled Teatro alla Scala, I just went mind blown. You know, same thing here. I love wearing this fragrance, and you know, it's big on things like incense and myrrh and cloves. There's a big clove note in this. This is one of the fragrances that really made me fall in love with cloves. And my bottle, I think it's about 20 years old or so, maybe 25 years old. You can see the batch code right there. But I would love to get one with the built-in sprayer. Apparently, those are even better. But I just love this so much. I don't know why I would want to go drop hundreds of dollars on a 1977 bottle when I just can't imagine them improving on this. Like, my brain just can't wrap around the fact that this could be better, you know, because this is so good. But it's so complex. Cloves, it's got this plum note in there. It's floral because of the jasmine and rose and lily of the valley. It's powdery because of the orris. Cinnamon, a Papanax, a sweet myrrh in this is unbelievable. And if you have the Secret de Parfum, which I have 2 bottles of, two bottles of the Secret de Parfum version, which came out in the 90s. This original one came out in 77. That really amps up the myrrh. So if you like the note of myrrh like I do, I love myrrh. And this has both myrrh and a Papanax, which is like sweet myrrh. Check out the Secret de Parfum. You will not be disappointed. But amazing fragrance. Orris root here is just part of the composition. But so happy to have this bottle. Okay, now we're going to go to another modern fragrance, if you will. This is from the house of Diptyque. And this is a fragrance called 34 Boulevard Saint Germain EDP. Okay, this is the address of, I guess, where the Diptyque facility is at, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the Eau de Parfum, but there's an EDT as well, which I've never done a comparison between the two. But this is apparently a little bit more amped up, like an Eau de Parfum should be. And this has notes of cinnamon, clove, cassis, pink pepper, and citruses, which someone was telling me that cassis and cassia, and there's a third one, they're completely different. Fragrantica has it wrong. If you click on cassis in Fragrantica, apparently it shows that it's a black currant leaf, which is supposed to give off this cat piss type of chord, but that's incorrect. For one of them, I'm not sure which, but I wish they would fix that because it is very confusing. But this has this floral heart, so it's got geranium, rose, tuberose, and it has iris and violet, so it has both notes. This is so, like, if you wanted to wear something that's very modern but different, if you will, so you don't want to wear some of the old school fragrances that I love so much, but you want to wear something that's modern, check this out. This is an amazing composition. And it has this warm amber underneath it all. It's very woody. There's a vanilla note. Oh, it's so good. And not many people talk about this. It's a magnetic cap too. It's a really nice presentation for 34 Saint Germain. There you go. You can see it there. Very nice. Very modern, but it is niche. So that's one to kind of keep on the radar if you don't want to be like a Ventus bro, if you will. And then sticking with the same house, these next two fragrances are kind of in the same vein, but this is Volutes. This is a honey tobacco fragrance with this dried fruit and immortelle accord. It also has the note of hay, which the next fragrance has a hay note as well, but came out before this. This came out in 2012. Fabrice Pellegrin is the perfumer, and this is the EDT. You can tell because of the white label, which I think is discontinued. I could be wrong, but I prefer the EDT in I know I just showed you an EDP, but especially in Volutes, I prefer the EDT. Has a little bit more room to, the fragrance has a little bit more room to air. It feels like it develops a little bit better. The EDT is much more stifling. And if I want something that's thicker in this composition, I'll wear the next fragrance that I'm going to show you. But Volutes has this beautiful iris flower note, very prominent in this fragrance, right up there with the tobacco and honey, and it's so good. If you don't know Volutes and you're a tobacco lover, this mixed with that beautiful iris note just really sets it off. So good. Love this fragrance. And I really like the house of Diptyque, by the way. Their compositions are not the most natural smelling, but very good. I really appreciate the quality. Even though they're synthetic, the quality to me is still very top notch. Okay, the next one is the one that kind of set this fragrance DNA on the map, and probably what was inspiring Volutes. And this is from the house of Serge Lutens, and this is Chergui. Look at that juice color. Oh, it's so good. And this is basically hay, tobacco leaf, honey with iris, and there's a beautiful incense note that kind of plays peekaboo. Comes and goes in the fragrance. Just beautiful composition. It is a little bit sweet, but I don't know if I would say, I don't know which is sweeter between the two. It would be a hard tell. Probably this one's a little bit sweeter to me, but the powderiness in both of them, the composition, the tobacco, honey with basically that powdery iris, I love wearing these fragrances. This and Ambre Sultan are two of my absolute favorite Serge Lutens. It's just too bad they haven't been able to put out something amazing in recent years, let's say. So, okay, now we're going to go. So I showed you some of the leather fragrances that use iris. Now I want to show you some of the floral fragrances that use the note of iris. And we're going to start with one of the most popular fragrances, probably the most popular fragrance of all time, and that is Chanel No. 5. So No. 5, this is the EDT in the vintage lipstick atomizer. And I gotta tell you, I am not the biggest fan. You can see how much I've got left there. I'm not the biggest fan of this fragrance. I think if I was forced to use No. 5, I would probably go for the Eau de Cologne. But this has a bigger iris prominent note, I think. So that's why I featured it. But this is aldehydic floral is basically what it is. Big ylang ylang, jasmine, rose, and then the orris root with lily of the valley. There's also a civet note underneath it all, which maybe that's why it's a little tough to wear. Maybe it's the big florals. But No. 5, if you don't know this fragrance, you probably don't know perfume. Glad to have it in my collection, but I can tell you it's not something I go around wearing constantly, but it's a great example of a floral using that powdery iris to create the composition. They did it again, and I like wearing this much more, actually. This is Chanel's number 19. This is the vintage EDT. It's a recharge, a refillable recharge, so I don't have a cap. But I honestly don't care because I love this fragrance so much. As far as like green Chypre fragrances, they were very popular in the 1970s. And this is my favorite of the bunch, hands down, for a green Chypre. Now, I haven't tried them all. I think there's a couple others that are supposed to be close to this. Jacquemo's Silences comes to mind. There was also a version of this that they made. I think it was called Chanel number 19 Poudre, if I'm not mistaken. I've never smelled that one. But this uses iris in such a beautiful way because it starts out with the most amazing galbanum that you will ever smell. To me, this is the landmark galbanum. There's iris and orris root listed. It does go powdery, but because of the masculine notes in the base, you know, those 70s women Chypres, they were very masculine compositions. So they had stuff like oak moss, vetiver, cedar, leather, sandalwood. Those are very masculine notes. And this is what the women of the time were wearing. So even though there are floral notes that maybe a guy who's not used to wearing fragrances like this might originally put them off because there's narcissus and jasmine and ylang, I would say continue to wear it and give it a try, and you will learn to love this fragrance. This is one of the greatest compositions by Chanel, in my opinion. And if it wasn't for fragrances like Antaeus and Le Lion, which I love so much, this would probably be at the top of the list for me. Okay, now we're gonna switch gears, and I'm gonna show you the House of Guerlain, which has also done some beautiful florals using the note of iris. And oh God, I'm so happy to have this decant. The first one I'm going to show you is Guerlain Metallica EDT. Now, they had to change the name. I believe they changed it to Metalys, Metalys, because the band actually sued them. Go figure. And this is one of Jean-Paul Guerlain's last compositions. This came out in the year 2000, okay? And it's a beautiful vanilla floral. No one does vanilla like Guerlain. And this starts out very zingy and fresh with this grapefruit, bergamot, orange. Even smelling it from the cap, it's amazing. It's got old school carnation, which I love, ylang. It's a little bit spicy, but then you get that powdery orris that really plays a beautiful role in the composition. The vanilla and the tonka bean in the base make it a little bit sweet, but I like wearing this much more than number 5, let's say. I'll tell you that, hands down. This is a better creation for me personally than number 5 EDT. And the florals in this are out of this world. It's a shame that this is so hard to find. I saw somebody selling one of those B bottles of Metallica for over like $1,500 on eBay or something. Just complete insanity. Don't pay that. Just purely out of spite. Even if you're a millionaire, do not pay that. Get a decant like this from somebody like Moudessir on Base Notes, and if you go through it, get another one. You know, this will run you $50 or something, and you can experience the fragrance and you know, really get to know it. A 10 ml decant's a pretty good size when you have a big collection. So another Guerlain floral that flies under the radar because it's known more for its vanilla than it is for anything else is a fragrance by Guerlain, of course, and it's called Shalimar. Now this is the extrait, okay? So this is not the regular Shalimar EDP that you know and I know and I love as well. The Extrait is a completely different beast. Look at that beautiful composition. This is an Amouage find. And there you go. There's the bottom. I believe this is a late 90s bottle, but I could be wrong. This is the Parfum. And the Parfum takes that Shalimar DNA that you know and love. It amps down the dirty vanilla just a little bit. So maybe the vanilla is still prominent, but that dirtiness, you know, because Shalimar is known for that bergamot with the vanillin, which was a brand new, material for a perfumer to use in the 1920s. And what they've done with the Extrait, or the Parfum, is that they've amped up the florals. So the mid has one of the most beautiful iris jasmine rose combinations I've ever smelled in my life. It is intoxicating, and I love the Shalimar vanilla. And so it has that beautiful vanilla that I love, but it's not as dirty as in the Parfum de Toilette from the 80s, which I have a bottle of. That's much more dirty. It almost feels like there's like castoreum in that, right? Here, the florals are amped up. And even though this is only a 8 milliliter, this is only 8 mils. It's a Parfum, so it's the Extrait. It's so good. Very, very lucky to have something like this when they only would list a couple notes in the ingredients. The presentation is not what we're used to nowadays when you get these big giant boxes, you know, that are covered in ostrich leather or all kind of crazy stuff like that. The presentation's a little bit cheap. This is just cardboard, really. But for what it is, it still works, and I'm very glad to have a little bit to be able to sample and enjoy at my leisure. And then another Guerlain, which again, I have a recharge bottle because when you're collecting, you don't always need the fanciest bottle because who cares? It's all about the juice, right? This is L'air Bleu, and this is the Eau de Parfum. This is big powder. This is one of the most powdery fragrances you could think about, and it's somebody like Eugene who loves powdery fragrances. I think this might be his favorite fragrance. I've heard him say that a couple times, and the florals in this are amazing. And I do, if you ask me to say a color when you think of L'air Bleu, it's not blue, it's purple. I get a big purple feeling from this fragrance. So that old saying about do you have the blues doesn't apply here. This is do you have the purples? And it is very purple feeling to me, and I think it's because it has that violety. The ionones here are probably really amped up. It smells that way, and but it's also big floral notes. There's heliotrope, and a lot of times you'll hear me say if you don't be careful with heliotrope, it'll kind of take over a composition. I feel like that really has happened here. There's a big heliotrope note with neroli and ylang-ylang, Bulgarian rose, jasmine, orchid, tuberose. I mean, you name iris, violet, name a flower, it's in here. And then it has that vanilla and benzoin underneath. It's a great composition. I can totally appreciate it. I think maybe if I had the EDT, I would like it a little bit more. The EDP is a little bit stifling. It's a little thick, but if you like thick, you know, heavy fragrances, check out the EDP. And the iris in here is beautiful. It's so powdery, you know, from the word go. It's not like it starts, you know, clean and fresh and then works its way powdery. This is a powder bomb from the minute it hits your skin. And I need to give it more wears, but this is a tough wear for me. It's something I'm still kind of learning to appreciate. Okay, next, make sure there's no fingerprint patrol citations. The next one on the list is Vol de Nuit. And this is the EDT. This is a little bit easier to wear for me because I can wear it in the warmer weather. and not feel like I'm choking someone out. This is a 30 ml bottle that is discontinued. You can see the 5-digit batch code, 9DA11. And this is a, if you like fragrances like number 19, you should check out Vol de Nuit, because it does have that greenness. It's very, very green from the galbanum. This is also a beautiful galbanum in this, but then it goes into that Guerlain, that Guerlainade, if you will, tends to come out in the dry down. And this is another one that I kind of need to work at to really enjoy, but I'm very glad to have a bottle like this. I hear the modern formulation is still quite good, but I wanted a vintage because I was worried about reformulation. And so there you go. That is Vol de Nuit. And then we're going to go to a Roja. And this is a Roja that I don't think deserves the hype. I think this is one of the most outrageously overpriced Rojas, in my opinion. You know, I said that on a video the other day, and someone came back and said, hey, I bought this for my mom, and she loves it or something. I'm not talking bad about the fragrance. I'm just saying, for me, what he's offering, the value for money is very low on this fragrance for me. And that is Chypre Extraordinare. There it is. Chypre Extraordinare. And Chypre Extraordinare is supposedly a Chypre done by Roja Dove without the use of oak moss. That's why it's an extraordinary Chypre. He was getting ready for the time where, what if oak moss was banned? Could you make a Chypre? Okay, and I would much rather wear Mitsuko, to be honest with you. I would much rather wear Diaghilev, if I'm going to be quite frank. If I'm going to wear a Chypre from Roja Dove, it'll probably be Diaghilev. But this is a fragrance that has many notes, just like most Rojas. There's aldehydes and bergamot in the top. There's peach, like Mitsuko. And then you get this huge floral heart. Ylang, tuberose, geranium, rose de mai, heliotrope, violet, jasmine, orange blossom. Again, name a floral, it's in there. With his labdanum, his cumin, which he loves amping those two up. And I can appreciate, I love labdanum and I love cumin. Cumin's a note that has to grow on some people. It has officially grown on me. Eau de Hermes made cumin like, you know, that's the greatest cumin fragrance of all time, in my opinion. So the cumin is kind of amped up to hide the fact that there's not any oak moss. Now, Fragrantica says that there's oak moss in here, but from my understanding, the whole point of this was to create a Chypre with no oak moss. There's civet, and then there's leather and orris and cedar and benzoin. So it's the orris in the base that really makes this powdery. And so Chypre Extraordinaire is one that, if this was a $50 fragrance, you know, would I wear it? Maybe. I think it would smell better on my wife, to be honest with you. But at $2,000 for 100 ml, I think he is completely out of his mind on this one, personally. But it does have a beautiful orris note, so I'm highlighting it. Okay, next we're going to move on to another Roja, which is even more outrageously overpriced. This is his $3,500 for 100 ml. Haute Luxe. Roja Haute Luxe. That's an H. And this fragrance, for me, is all about the labdanum. It's all about the labdanum. This is a, if there was any fragrance that could compete with Le Lion for the greatest labdanum fragrance of all time, I think this would be it. Now, I think Le Lion is better, to be honest with you, even though it's a tenth of the price. And Le Lion is not cheap. It's $400 for 200 ml. This is $3,500 for 100 ml. And I think there's only 250 bottles of this made a year for the entire globe. The notes on Fragrantica I don't get a lot of, okay? It has bergamot, ylang, jasmine, rose de mai, benzoin, cloves, oak moss, cinnamon, iris. vanilla, labdanum, ginger, patchouli, amber, amyris, styrax, vetiver, and cedar. So for me, I get a huge dose of labdanum and oak moss. And there's some jumbled florals in there, but it's very hard to pick out. The iris doesn't make it as powdery as something like Chypre Extraordinare or, say, L'air Bleu. It's nowhere near as powdery. It's more resinous, leathery from the labdanum. Not a leather accord like Bel Ami, but that leatheriness that you get from labdanum, which is completely different of a feel. Smoky from the labdanum. The labdanum feels like it is the highlight of this show. And I love labdanum, but don't get me wrong, if we're talking value for money, Le Lion eats Haute Luxe's lunch, in my opinion. Some people just look at the price and go, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever smelled. No, it's definitely not worth $3,500. Okay. So now let's go to a Chanel. It's not Le Lion, though. There's no orris or iris in Le Lion from my experience or understanding. But there is in a fragrance called Coromandel. Now, this is the EDP, okay? Some people say the EDT is better. I can't speak to that. But what I can say is that if you want a patchouli fragrance, a patchouli with incense and olibanum. There's supposed to be this white chocolate accord. I think it's just the chocolatey patchouli. There is patchouli gives off this chocolatiness from time to time, okay? With this beautiful orris root to keep everything, you know, nice and fuzzy. Check this out. Coromandel, if you've never smelled it, is amazing. I actually wish, since I have a lot of patchouli fragrances, watch my patchouli video if you want to kind of get a deeper, in-depth dive into my collection. But, you know, for me, I almost wish I had 200 mLs of Le Lion instead of 75 of Coromandel and 75 of Le Lion. But still, happy, very happy to have it. And then we're going to go to a fragrance that I consider a bit of a freshie. I wear this in the summer, but it uses the note of iris. And it is a fragrance called Chevignon Heritage. Now, this is a very fresh fragrance. It's a cheapie, too. This did not make my cheapie list, but it is a cheapie. I think I spent 35 bucks on 100 ml. Not many people talk about the House of Chevignon. This came out in 2013. It's almost a decade old, believe it or not. But it's clary sage, ozonic notes in the top with iris and citruses, and what they call dark woody notes, which to my nose just seems like cedar, a cedar accord. But it's a very wearable fragrance, especially for summer. Those ozonic notes in the top, in the citruses, the iris keeps it interesting. And so for a fragrance that I probably normally wouldn't touch, I think that the iris is like the savior in this. And if you want to wear this in the summer, absolutely be my guest. I think this would go over very well. And I think it's pretty well received. It does have that a little bit mass appealing, maybe a little too mass appealing for my nose, but Chevignon Heritage, beautiful iris note in this. Okay, now we're going to go on to the last one on this side, and then we're going to go to the other side of the table. So the last one is one I wish I had a full bottle of, and bravo to Antoine Lee for creating such beautiful art. This is Les Indemodables Muscs de Sables. Now, I don't have a full bottle of this. Like I said, I have a 10 ml decant. And I've never given this a full wear, but I've worn it to bed a couple times, and it is beautiful. It has that same lovely ambergris note that, let's say, Ombre Supreme from the same house has. And apparently he did one, I believe he did a fragrance from Eris Parfums called MXXX, which also has a lovely ambergris note. He's kind of becoming the king of ambergris. But this adds this musk, orris root, patchouli, and what they call leaf green patchouli leaf and green mandarin. Now, I'm not as familiar with green mandarin, but this is a great fragrance. It wears light. It's not a huge projector, but that ambergris kind of gives off something special. And these Les Indemodables are special fragrances. And the orris root here kind of shares the star of the show with ambergris and maybe a little bit of musk. So check that one out. All right, let's go to the second side of the table. And the second side, we're going to go to Versace's The Dreamer. Now, most people think about this as a tobacco fragrance. It's not. It's a tobacco flower fragrance, or tobacco blossom, they call it, with 3 floral notes that are very important. Iris, lily, and the note of flax, which you don't see very often. But the iris in this fragrance is kind of the star of the show. Not a lot of people mention it, but it's this floral, you know, if you've ever seen tobacco flowers, they're these little white flowers and tobacco blossoms. And this does have that white floral iris, you know, fresh thing going on. Some people didn't like that because they said it smelled a bit like laundry musk, but I actually really like this fragrance, and it's a great value for money. This is a original bottle. I would love to smell. This is a newer bottle. I would love to smell the original. Apparently there are differences, but I really like that fragrance. And then we're going to go to the House of Creed, and I chose 2 fragrances to highlight the note of iris. The first is called Spice and Wood. So it doesn't say spice and iris. It says spice and wood. And iris is kind of like a, you know, a third tier fragrance, or it's kind of like, you know, a third buddy on a date, let's say. So it is about spice and wood. Spice and wood is the main thing here. It would be strange if spice and wood were not the main 2 things in a fragrance called Spice and Wood. But the iris adds this, you know, it adds this powdery, obviously iris always adds this powderiness to it. But without the iris, I think this would be a very bland composition. It does have angelica, just like Royal Oud has the note of angelica, which I also love. I love that note. And as you can see, I didn't use all this. I bought a partial bottle, and because this is a very expensive fragrance. This is like $1,000 now for, this is a 200 ml, 250 ml bottle. And so this is well over $1,000 for this bottle. But Creed Spice and Wood, lovely clove and pepper and birch and musk. Yeah, very musky. But that iris and cedar, and by the way, Royal Oud also uses a cedar and angelica combo. So they were kind of on a roll there. But they've done the top with apple and lemon and bergamot. This is a great summer fragrance to me. Spice and Wood, lovely note of iris. Another iris note in the Creed lineup that not a lot of people talk about. And this is a vetiver fragrance. And this is a bit of a powdery vetiver fragrance. And I also love wearing this in the summer because it's this crisp, clean vetiver with some beautiful Creed sandalwood and ambergris. And that is the original vetiver. Now, this smells a lot like Mugler's Cologne, okay? This came out in 2004. It's a little strange seeing Irwin and Olivier Creed listed as perfumers, even to this day. But, hey, what can you do? I would love to know who made this fragrance. No offense, Creed. Please don't sue me. But I think it's pretty well known that Olivier Creed and Irwin Creed did not make this fragrance in 2004. Who was the ghost perfumer? They did a lovely job with this. This is my favorite vetiver for warm weather. In the summer, I love this because it has this ginger. The ginger in this is outstanding, and it mixes with this Haitian vetiver and, you know, Creed's sandalwood. That very clean sandalwood with this iris that adds this powderiness to all of the above. It's so good. There's also a mandarin orange note, which is very prominent. So that is a very easy wear. So now we're going to go from an easy wear to a tough wear. This was my scent of the day the other day. And the iris in this plays a huge role. It actually, the iris, it looks like an iris colored bottle. It's Myths Man. Amouage Myths Man. And this is a 50 ml. I don't know if they do 50 mLs anymore, but this fragrance, wow. You want to see iris used in a complex and unique composition? Check out Myths Man. It is unbelievable. It has this chrysanthemum top with orris, and then there's elemi, rum, vetiver, and rose in the mid, and ash and leather and labdanum in the base. And it does smell like ash. It doesn't smell like olibanum, like that oily olibanum. No, this smells like straight ash. And what's interesting is that chrysanthemum in many cultures is known as a funeral flower. Okay, so you've got this funeral flower with this huge powderiness, which if you're not experienced and you smell this, you will say that this smells like a nightmare. And that's exactly what an unexperienced nose would say about this fragrance. And it is an insane fragrance. I've heard a lot of people on Fragrantica call this an absolute nightmare. It's like walking into a hotel room that has been around for, 60 years in Las Vegas. Not one of the new hotels, one of the old ones, like the Flamingo or something. And you walk in and you get this stale cigarette smoke with rum spilled all over, old alcohol lying around. And then it's powdery. The chrysanthemum flower, I can't say I know what it smells like on its own, but it's a purple and white-ish flower. It almost feels like it smells like the bottle would look. And then the leather note in this, though, my God, it just, if you're wearing like a leather belt or, you pull out your leather wallet or a leather jacket, this accents it so well. It's so unique. The orris makes this fragrance. I don't think you could have this composition without the orris. So Myths Man, if you want something unique and if you want something niche for the pricing, check this out. Okay, now we're going to go from a hard to wear Amouage to maybe a little bit easier to wear. I wear this one in the summer, and this is not a made in Oman. This is just a regular, I guess, made in the UK version. This is Amouage Reflection Man. So again, the way you can tell the older bottles that they actually say the name right there on the collar, Reflection Man. The new ones, I think, say it here on the bottle somewhere. But man, this is such an awesome smelling floral fragrance for men. It was done by Lucas Swiezak, which I can't really think of anything else that he's made. I'll have to take a look, but there's this old school rosemary like you get in Paco Rabanne pour Homme, but the star of the show is jasmine and neroli and orris. Those three floral hearts, those three in the heart make this fragrance. And then you get this sandalwood, vetiver, cedar, and patchouli in the base. For summertime, it is so good. Some people say wear this in the winter. I wear this in the summer. Some people say you get this cilantro type smell from this. I don't really get the cilantro. I definitely get the powderiness from the orris. So it's powdery and floral, which doesn't seem like it would be a masculine fragrance, but it just works so well. This came out in 2007, so 2 years after Dior Homme came out and kind of started bending the gender rules. And this is this clean, clean sheet. You put this on a white shirt, absolutely beautiful. And then we're gonna go back to a harder to wear Amouage. This came out in the year 2018. So it's 4 years old now. And it was issued by Leslie Gerard, who I'm not as familiar with her work, but I saw a video that Galen just put up a couple days ago, actually, about this fragrance. So I was very glad to hear it get some love. He called it a masterpiece. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I do love this fragrance. It's called Imitation Man by Amouage. Look at the bottle. Look at the bottle. It is absolutely stunning. And this is supposed to represent Christopher Chong's life in the 1970s, growing up in New York City. This does have this vinyl vintage smell to it, but it starts out with citron, which is almost like this bitter citrus type smell, nutmeg and black pepper, but then the star of the show here is orris, Turkish rose, violet with this leather and myrrh and castoreum. Insane combination. Just like this is an insane combination, this is an insane combination, but they just work somehow, and they're so powerful. These are powerful fragrances, and they last and last and last, and they're unique, and that's why I loved what Christopher Chong did while he was at Amouage, because the compositions are just mind-blowing. The orris in this, again, you want to smell two fragrances that use orris in a very unique way to build a composition like you've never smelled. Check these two out. They are top-notch as far as uniqueness goes, and orris really making the fragrance. The orris and violet in this are unbelievable. And how do you get a vinyl accord out of those notes? I have no idea, but it's maybe it is a masterpiece. And then probably the one that people think of when they think of Iris and Amouage, it's this. This is Interlude's Black Iris. So you can see how the name is written on the front now, because this is a newer bottle and it's not written right here anymore. So this is their first flanker that they've ever put out. And I was very hesitant to buy this fragrance because I already have the original. And I thought, what was the point of getting a flanker with the Iris amped up? Well, I'm glad I did, because this is a great fragrance. Probably the best thing that they've put out under the new creative director, to be honest with you. I bought Boundless. I'm not a very big fan of it. It's good. It starts out kind of spicy and stuff, and you get that tobacco, but for me, this is probably the best thing that they put out. And they had the original perfumer, Pierre Negrin, make this, so they took Interlude. They kind of toned down that oregano note, which kind of bothered people in the first fragrance, and they amped up the iris to make it a little bit more wearable, a little bit more mass appealing, you could say. So it's still Interlude, but it has that iris toned up, and glad to have it. I'm glad I didn't pay full retail, though. I got it at a little bit better price because I waited. Sometimes that's the way to go. Okay. Now I want to show you a fragrance that is one of my favorite iris fragrances that nobody talks about. I'm going to show you the original first, and then I'm going to show you the one I'm talking about. The original does not make the list. At least I don't think there's any iris in the original. The original is called Lolita Lampica Eau Masculine. So it's called Eau Masculine. Now this is not the one I'm talking about. I just wanted to show you this because this is the one everyone knows. And it's an Annick Monardo. It's a beautiful composition. I love this fragrance, but it's more about the anise. And, you know, there is a violet note in here, though. So like I was saying earlier, who's training to be a perfumer, basically has the knowledge of a perfumer, said that in order to create that violet or orris accord, you use the same materials, just dose them differently. So maybe you do get a little bit of an iris note in this, but the one that it's amped up in is this one. This is the EDP Intense, okay? And this both of these are discontinued, I should mention. So they are both discontinued. Oh, you can't see them both. Well, there's one. And here's the other one. So as you can see, I bought a tester, but so what? But what they've done is they've taken the original with the licorice and the anise and the vanilla and the rum, and they amped the iris up. This came out in 2015. And so they amped the iris up and they added this oud note. So it still keeps the star anise. It keeps that resinous feel because of the myrrh, but the iris here is unbelievably beautiful. again, they used Annick Menardo to do the recreation, the flanker of her original fragrance, and I really like that. And this is a shame this is discontinued, because my God, the iris in this is, I mean, there's no other word for it but beautiful. It is breathtakingly beautiful is the word that I would use. It is breathtakingly beautiful. It stopped me in my tracks. So good. So that is Lolita Lampica Eau Masculine. And then now we're getting into the heart of the iris fragrances that people probably know and talk about. I don't have them all. I don't have the new Givenchy Gentleman series, which has a big iris note apparently. L'Eau Boisée or whatever it's called. But this is Prada L'Homme Intense, okay? Now, Prada L'Homme Intense, apparently, rumor around the campfire, is that it is discontinued. And if you like soapy, clean fragrances, but you want to add a little bit of oomph to it, you know, if you want to wear like a heavier iris fragrance to work, this one would be perfect, because it takes that Prada L'Homme DNA and it doesn't, some people say it projects big. I don't get all this huge projection like people talk about. This just kind of sits on the skin. And, you know, it sits a little closer than I would actually like, I would think. You know, this is iris, amber, patchouli, tonka, leather, and sandalwood. But it has that Prada soapy freshness to it, which makes it very applicable for like a work or interview or something like that. Beautiful iris fragrance. And then we're going to go to Valentino Uomo Intense. Now we're getting into the heart of the iris fragrances that people think about. This is iris and vanilla with leather. And the leather here, I love what they've done with this fragrance. This is probably my favorite Valentino fragrance that I own. Even though I own Very Valentino for Men, that's discontinued. I think I enjoy wearing this a little bit more. This came out in 2016. They do have a new bottle now that has like spikes around the collar. I don't know. I've never compared the two, but if you can still get your hands on this, do it. It is an amazing iris composition. I love wearing these iris fragrances. Now, before we get to the Dior Homme line, I want to show you a couple fragrances that are heavily inspired by Dior Homme. And I'll show you the cap in comparison to this one when we get there, once I pull out the regular Dior Homme at the end. But this is a fragrance called Arpège Pour Homme by Leonard Perse. Now, I don't own many fragrances from this house. I got this from Amouage Enchanté Perfumes. Thank you, sir. I think he still has some, but this is a discontinued fragrance. If you want an iris fragrance that came out right around the time as the original Dior Homme, the cap, actually, when I show you, I'll show you how close they tried to make the cap actually look like the Dior Homme sprayer. But this is pink pepper, bitter orange, neroli, and mandarin orange in the top, iris, nutmeg, jasmine in the mid, vanilla, tonka, sandalwood, and patchouli in the base. And this is a good fragrance. It's very pleasant. It's very of that time, you know, the middle 2000s, 2005. And, you know, it is, while it's not Dior Homme, it does have its own differences, if you will. It is very, very close. And I enjoy, I gave this a full wear when I got it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And glad to have it. Like I said, it is discontinued. But as an iris lover, if you like fragrances like Valentino Uomo Intense or Prada L'Homme Intense, check this one out. The vanilla is amped up on this. It's very, very wearable. And then there was one other creation that I wanted to share with you guys. Fragrantica says it's a pure Bourdon creation. And it came out 1 year after Dior Homme. It's called Ferre for Men. Sorry, I wanted to show you the For Men. Not for Man. For Man came out in the 80s. This is for men. This came out in 2006, okay? So the bottle looks like this. This is a mini. I wish I had a full bottle of this. This was done by Pierre Bourdon, according to Fragrantica. And what's interesting is this is iris leaf in the top and black iris in the mid with a pineapple note in the top. Now, we know that Jean-Christophe Hérault, who was Pierre Bourdon's pupil, used pineapple in Aventus. Okay, now that's broken, now that the book is out. The Ghost Perfumer, go read that book if you haven't. So Pierre Bourdon was experimenting with iris, or with pineapple at that time. So very interesting. And you know, this is a beautiful iris scent. Stands on its own compared to Dior Homme, but obviously it's of that time. It has that DNA. It has that Dior Homme DNA, but done by master perfumer Pierre Bourdon. So, if you're like me and you're big into collecting from individual perfumers, check that one out. Okay, let's start with Dior Homme Intense. This came out in, I think the original was issued in 2007, and then they did a reform in 2011. This is the 2011 reformulation. My batch is 3Q04, so this is a 2013 bottle, and oh God, I love this fragrance. You talk about makeup-y iris. The ambrette in this is top-notch. One of Francois Demachy's best creations. There's a pear note and a lavender note, which keep it kind of fresh. Everyone says, oh, you can only wear this in the winter. Probably that's true, but I will wear it when the weather's warmer, 70, 80, just not when it's 90 or 100. And there's a cedar and vetiver note in the base, but the iris, oh God, I love this series, and I love these bottles. I love the Dior Homme bottles. They are one of my favorite bottles of all time. And then we're going to go on to Dior Homme Parfum, which Dior Homme Parfum was released in, this is a 75 ml that's discontinued. Now they make them in 100 ml only, 2014. And again, one of Francois Demachy's best. Oh, God. This came out in, my bottle is 7... my bottle is 7Q02, I think. So it's a 2017 batch. And it is a darker take on Dior Homme Intense. They've added oud, they've amped up the leather, but the iris is still just, oh, I love the note of iris. I freaking love the note of iris in perfumery. And this is leather and iris, some of my favorite things, as I mentioned earlier, with Cuir Cannage and Cuir de Russie and Great Britain, and one of the best designers of all time. And now this has become a bro perfume. I don't know how that happened, but the bros moved on from Aventus to Dior Homme Parfum. Don't ask me how that happened. And then I want to show you one of my prized possessions, one of my favorite iris fragrances, and one of the best designer fragrances of all time. And this is not Francois Demachy. This is Olivier Polge. This is 2005. And this is Dior Homme, the original silver stem from 2005. If you go to Fragrantica, you have to look up Dior Homme 2005, and you will see this composition. Now, look at the caps. Let me show you something. Look at the cap of Lanvin Arpege, and look at the cap of Dior Homme. See how they tried to make it very similar? But it's not the actual, this is the actual cap. And they did the exact same thing. It's not the sprayer, it's the cap that looks that way. So Lanvin copied Dior, and they did a very good job, if I'm being honest with you. But nothing replaces this. I love wearing this fragrance. I am in love with this fragrance. The cacao, the powderiness from the iris, the detail. This has this detail that the ones Demachy do not have. You know, there's sage. It's masculine because there's lavender. There's old school lavender in here. There is a leather note, but it comes later. It's not in your face like the Parfum. Of all the three, this is the greatest one. Hands down. I will not hear any other arguments. You can tell me I've got fingerprints on my bottle, but you cannot tell me that the 2011 or 2007 Intense or the 2014 Parfum are better than this. And the way that he reformulated this is a travesty. Dior Homme 2020 sucks. I don't want to hear anything. Even if you have grown to like that fragrance, it is not Dior Homme. It is a completely different fragrance, and they should not have called it Dior Homme. Because imagine going to buy Dior Homme after not owning it for many years, and they give you that, and you get home and go, what in the hell did I just buy? So, the original is a masterpiece. This is a masterpiece. I don't care if the iris is not niche quality iris. I don't care if it's, you know, the same iris compounds that Valentino Uomo or Prada use. I don't care about any of that. It's the composition. It's the way that Olivier Polge created this. You know, when you pay for a fragrance, you're not just paying for the ingredients. Because if that was the case, you and I could just take a bunch of good ingredients and dump them in and bam, pay me the money. No, you're paying for the perfumer's know-how and skill. And Olivier Polge, I think he got himself the Chanel job because of this, in my opinion. And so as far as iris fragrances go, wearable irises, this is one of my favorites, and I'm so happy I have 100 ml of this because it is rarer and rarer, and people know what they have, and they're asking more and more money for this. And you know, I just love the original Dior Homme from 2005. So I hope you guys have loved the iris. This is not a top 10. We're at 1 hour and 16 minutes. Thank you so much for watching. I know I did a few first impressions, so I figured I'd come back on a Sunday and give you guys that this is not a top 10 fragrance. Let me know what your favorite iris fragrances are. I know I don't have stuff like Iris Silver Mist on here, Iris Poudre. I know I'm missing some of the big ones, but these are the ones in my collection that I have and I could show you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for spending some time with me, and let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, and I'll see you again tomorrow with another fragrance video. Cheers!